Have you ever wondered why oil is traded in barrels and not some other unit of volume? If you ever watch the news, you may see the little ticker at the bottom of the screen of oil futures, and that price is by the barrel. You may also be surprised to find out that that barrel is not your standard 55-gallon drum or the metric equivalent, the 200-liter drum. The volume of a barrel of oil actually has ties to a British royal decree from the 15th century. Some of you may already know that the oil industry got kicked off in 1859 when Edwin Drake drilled a successful oil well near the town of Titusville, Pennsylvania. Edwin Drake's first well only produced about 15 to 25 barrels per day, but prior to his well, some efforts to extract oil that seeped up naturally from the ground could only produce this many barrels in a year. So this was a huge leap forward. Compare that to today, the world consumes about 101 million barrels of oil today. So once Edwin Drake tapped his well and it was producing somewhere between 15 and 25 barrels a day, how do you get it from the oil well to the end consumer? Well, the 55-gallon drum of today, that would be 44 British Imperial gallons, or the 200-liter drum worldwide. Those patents for those drums didn't come around until 1905, so this is well after Edwin Drake dug his first well. It just so happens that in 1859, that dry goods and wet goods were transported in barrels like they had been for centuries. Edwin Drake and others would use any barrels that they could get their hands on. Now, making a barrel is a very labor-intensive and time-consuming process, so a barrel is expensive. If you could use a large barrel, you had better economies of scale, but they were rather heavy and difficult to move by man and animal. This was long before the days of portable engines, so everything had to be done by brute force of man and beast. Likewise, if you used smaller barrels, the cost of the barrel was not very cost effective in the grand scheme of things. Fast forward a few years when the fledgling oil industry started to grow, and some of the early oil producers met and agreed upon a standard barrel size. And the standard barrel size that they picked was the tierce. And the tierce just happened to be a wine barrel that held 42 gallons of wine. This volume of 42 gallons for a wine barrel goes back to King Richard III in the late 1400s when he made a royal decree that a puncheon would be 84 gallons and a tierce would be 42 gallons. The benefit of using the 42-gallon tierce was that once it was full of oil, it weighed about 300 pounds, which 2 to 3 men could reasonably wrestle onto wagons, onto rail cars, and ultimately onto the end consumer. These 42-gallon tierces also were convenient for the early railroads. It is said that 20 tierce barrels could easily fit on a standard rail car of the time. You may have picked up on the statement where I said a 55 US gallon drum is equivalent to a 44 British Imperial gallon drum or a 200-liter drum. So why are British and US gallons different? Well, the United States originally was a British colony, and as such, their units of measure were the same. This is where the metric system people often laugh at the customary British system of measurement, and I can't argue with that. During the 1700s, there were 3 different gallons in the British system. There was the dry gallon, which was about 268.8 cubic inches of volume. There was the ale gallon, which was about 282 cubic inches of volume. And there was the wine gallon, which was 231 cubic inches. When the United States won its independence from Britain in 1776, the United States decided to adopt the wine gallon as the standard U.S. gallon, which was 231 cubic inches. Fast forward to 1824, Britain decided to standardize their measurements, and they elected to create an entirely new British imperial gallon that was somewhere in between the other gallons in existence and came up with about 277.5 cubic inches for the volume of the British imperial gallon. So there you have it. To this day, we trade oil in barrels of 42 US gallons because that was a convenient size at the time of the early oil industry that was born in the United States. And that tierce barrel actually has ties back to King Richard III in the 1400s. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Thank you for watching, and as always, stay curious.